Um, Trying to live the experiences a little bit as honestly as possible. Trying to also come to grips with how hard it is to get re-triggered with a couple of decades worth of trauma. I would still say it's also in the space of a place that you have this love for, this sense that sometimes you love the person or the place, even when you know that they're causing you harm.
What was your experience at Seattle Children's? In what ways did racism manifest?
I described it once as sort of being in a large pot of water and having a heating source start to sort of heat up that water and make it come to a boil, and experiencing that as something that is all around you, sometimes directed exactly at you, but being essentially submerged in it. It was a combination of some very direct, very personal, very, very traumatic experiences, in addition to a number of experiences that I was watching happen to colleagues and peers, in addition to policies and direct actions that were impacting, maybe most importantly, these amazing families and patients that I worked with in the hospital all over the course of many years. One of the things that was also issue in the trial was the CFO in the CEO's office, in a group of people where I was the only Black person, saying that they did not believe in institutional racism. How it impacts somebody like me trying to see if a hospital can still change is really powerful, because the silence that follows that means that there's not a challenge to that statement. And in a space where data, science, and knowledge is supposed to really matter, that is a very damning kind of condition.
And how did the hospital's response, or lack of a response, to your concerns around this impact you in the workplace and others of color?
There's a lot of times when your own self-confidence is undermined in such a way that you just wonder, is this all in my head? Is this something that is really happening? Did I really just hear that? Did that really just happen? They talk about gaslighting. I don't think I knew that term until a few years ago, but it was definitely a component of that experience. I was surprised by the ways in which sometimes a direct harm brought me a sense of shame, of self-recrimination, in addition to feeling outraged, in addition to feeling a sense of personal anger. The effect of being in environments like that is that you feel very much alone. You could be around other people suffering similarly, and you can also still feel very isolated, very alone.
During the trial, you say the hospital used a certain kind of playbook in pitting BIPOC people, Black and brown people, against each other. I
will say that it is deplorable that the hospital would use that kind of strategy. I think that pitting of Black and brown people against each other was one of the hardest parts of that trial, and it felt very reminiscent of what Seattle Children's tended to do during the time that I worked there as well.
What was it like for you to see some of your former colleagues called on the part of the defense to call your character into question after all of these years?
What it brought for me and brings for me today is deep frustration with the hospital. And I will not say negative things about them, especially in this context, because that plays right into what I think the hospital desires, which is that kind of pitting and splitting.
I want to talk about the use of the N-word by a hospital administrator.
I do wonder if it's possible for someone who's not Black to fully understand what the impact of that word is. And I don't know the answer to that. It is, in so many ways, a word. And yet what it carries with it in this country is a history of dehumanization, a story of denigration, a tale of erasure and separation from your place in society. Sometimes in our history, it's been the last word a Black person hears before they die. There was one jury member who identified as African American. What she said was she would not allow people to substitute with the term N-word, because she wanted people to really hear the fullness of that word and actually understand that that is what was happening, that there was that word, not a substitute for it, not some other phrase that was easier on the ears, that there was that word that was being used. It was not only that that word was used in direct reference to me, but it was used also as part of almost a lecture by this person, that he was saying that there were good N-words and there were bad N-words, that there were these two categories of us in this country, and that in some ways there were the ones that seemed to behave themselves and followed along and didn't stir up things or cause trouble, and then there's others like me who were just identified as a problem. And to me, it was the lack of response from leadership, from that hospital culture that was its own harm, in addition to this hateful, dehumanizing language that was coming at me from this one person.
The jury was predominantly not black and brown.
Yeah.
It was predominantly female,
Yeah.
8 members.
Yeah.
They did seem to understand the impact of the use of that word.
What these women told me was that even if their own lived experience did not connect to this extreme denigration of being called as a black person in this country, what they did understand absolutely was what it looked like and felt like to experience workplace hostility, to experience oppression in the workplace, to experience that kind of marginalization.
And what did that mean to you?
For whatever else happens, for that moment, there was a jury, there was a community of people who understood, who recognized, and who, most importantly, for an institution that resisted accountability, held that place accountable for their actions.
What is the message do you think it sends to other institutions, hospitals and beyond?
You can't hide behind the idea that, oh, it's everywhere, so we have no responsibility whatsoever for what happens in our place. You can't hide behind the idea that we just didn't think it was that big a deal, and you shouldn't be making that big a deal out of it. When you are faced with the evidence and the facts that it is happening in your space, in your moment, in a way that you are able to control and you do not control it, you are accountable for those actions and the impacts of those actions.
Or you are culpable.
You're culpable.
Did this experience change you?
Part of my life, to be honest, is trying to unlearn some things. The importance of being eloquent, composed, dress better, just a little bit better than everybody else, just to make sure that there's more of a chance that you might be treated with respect. By all means, no matter what else happens, make sure you are not seen as an angry black man, because angry black men die. If the next person coming up is not allowed to be angry ever, we don't make progress as a community if you're only seen as credible if you are seen as composed at every single moment. The ways in which we isolate, separate, and treat each other, if that does not frustrate you, make you angry, then we're never going to change. What doesn't change for me is I have huge faith in our communities. I've been lifted up by their love over and over and over again. And so one institution can't take that away from me.